Alright folks, welcome to the second installment of Windows 8.1 operating systems. Last week I asked you to watch a couple lectures and do the reading for the first chapter, which deals with an overview of Windows 8.1. I hope you found it entertaining and gives you an idea, a little bit of what we're going to be discussing more in detail in the next upcoming weeks. This week we're going to be looking at installation of Windows 8.1. And we're also going to be talking about migrating from one version of an operating system to the latest 8.1 operating system. So let's go ahead and get started, shall we? Before we actually talk about the meat and potatoes of this lecture, I do want to talk a little bit about the exam objectives. If you're looking to take the 70-687 exam with Microsoft, which covers single user operating systems, 8.1, this lecture will cover Objective 1.2, which deals with the installs of 8.1. We'll talk a little bit about Windows to Go. We're going to talk about clean installs versus upgrades. We're going to talk about how to install Windows 8 to a VHD or virtual hard disk. And we're going to also talk a little bit about Windows to Go, which is a nifty little tool which will allow you to carry your own portable little operating system wherever you go, thereby not having to leave a footprint on your friends' computers or a computer at work, or if you go and do a lot of lectures and you're using a Windows 8 environment and you're comfortable with that and you don't know what you're going to be walking into in a lecture hall, Windows to Go is the tool for you. So let's go ahead and get started. First of all, I want to talk a little bit about the boot environment for Windows 8.1 before we actually talk about the installation of the Windows operating system itself. First of all, I want to give you a little bit of history about the boot environment. Prior to Windows 7, that is Windows XP, all the way back to the earliest incarnation of Windows, we used an operating system called DOS in order to install the Windows operating system. It actually acted as a layer between the hardware and the Windows operating system. This is because DOS came out before the Windows environment, and in order to do the bare metal install, we had to install the DOS, the command line operating system DOS, in order to put that Windows layer on top of it. So this worked fine for a while, but as time progressed, that DOS environment became less and less suitable for today's operating systems. So we came out with Windows PE. The latest version of Windows PE is 5.0. There are actually 3 versions of Windows PE out there. There's Windows 3, PE3, there's PE4, which actually ships with the Windows 7 operating system, and of course Windows PE 5.0, which is based on the Windows 8.1 kernel. So why did we transition to Windows PE? Well, DOS is a 16-bit operating system. Today's systems today are 32, or in most cases, as we wane away from 32-bit operating systems, we're moving into the 64-bit operating system range, and trying to find and install antiquated 16-bit drivers to install 32 and 64-bit operating systems just didn't make sense. It was not a very flexible operating system, and it was not capable of doing a lot with the storage mediums in today's operating system environments. So Microsoft started looking for another pre-installation environment after XP was distributed, and they came out with Windows PE. Windows PE is indeed a stripped down version of the operating system it supports. So for 5.0, it's a stripped down version of the 8.1 kernel. This gives us a lot of flexibility because essentially Windows PE is a version of the operating system. It's capable of actually running some applications that run in that Windows environment. It does allow us as system administrators to boot a computer with no operating system installed, helps initiates that operating system setup process for us. There are some significant advantages to Windows PE compared to Microsoft DOS. As I said, DOS was a 16-bit operating system. It was, by the way, created by Bill Gates, sold to IBM. IBM then deployed DOS in its earliest desktop units that came out in the early 80s. Most people, when they bought a IBM PC, it had IBM DOS installed on it. Bill Gates then took that DOS and modified it, called it Microsoft, came up with Microsoft, and later used that MS-DOS as a deployment tool for the Windows architecture. So, as I said before, it is native 32-bit and 64-bit support built into Windows PE, which also means it supports those 32 and 64-bit drivers. No need now to go back and look for those antiquated drivers to try to get the install process working and then replace them with newer versions of the drivers. It will support most of the native drivers built or sent with the hardware that comes with the system. It also has its own network stack built into Windows PE. That means that we no longer have to worry about connecting to the network through some sort of third-party utility. Now we can do that integral to the Windows PE environment. Also, Windows PE supports most of the storage mediums that are shipped and used in today's hardware environments. NTFS support, most importantly. Still supports FAT, but NTFS support is native into the Windows PE operating system, so that means that drives that already are supported or formatted with NTFS will show up in Windows PE. They also, because of all these things I just mentioned, this gives us some flexible boot options. This is very important if you realize you've got to install some third-party drivers, say on DVD. Well, now I can boot from USB. I don't have to have a DVD drive. I can boot from USB. I can even create what's called a RAM disk, which allows me to create this kind of virtual disk that sits in RAM with the Windows PE operating system, which will free up my DVD-ROM in case I need to install third-party utilities, third-party drivers that were not shipped with PE. And it just gives us as network administrators a lot more flexible options when it comes to customizing installs, particularly with that scripting language support. So, also something to mention with Windows PE. Windows PE up until recently was something that unless you were a Windows subscriber, you couldn't get. But now anyone, it's now free. It ships as a standalone version as part of what's called the Windows 8.1 Assessment and Deployment Toolkit, which we'll talk about a little bit. The toolkit comes with a wide variety of tools. It comes with the Application Compatibility Toolkit, or ACT. This is a toolkit that will allow administrators to troubleshoot, check on a system prior to the installation of the Windows 8.1 environment so that we can eradicate any kind of compatibility issues that may exist. They also comes with a suite of deployment tools which allows administrators to deploy Windows with into a network environment without necessarily having to physically touch all of the systems at once. It's a very nice way to be able to streamline the deployment process of the Windows 8.1 environment. As part of that deployment, I may choose to use the User State Migration Toolkit. USMT has been around a while, usually downloaded as a third-party utility from Microsoft, but it's a command line based tool that will allow me to go in and either pull data from user profiles or pull user profiles out and save them to a network share and then redeploy them back onto the new operating system. And we'll talk a little bit about the USMT. Volume Activation Management Toolkit allows us to actually deploy and manage licensing from the actual ADK environment. There's also the Windows Assessment Toolkit and Assessment Services, which allows me to do remote options for our operating systems, as well as go in and check some of the performance issues with our systems, things like adding or running multi-user environments on hardware to see what it ends up happening with that hardware. And then of course the Windows pre-installation environment, as I said, ships as part of this entire package. Windows PE, there are some limitations to Windows PE, even though it is a far more stable platform for the pre-installation environment as DOS. Windows PE was never intended to function as a full-time operating system. So even though I can run some applications in the Windows PE environment, it only behooves you to go ahead and follow through and install the full 8.1 Windows environment on the operating system. For starters, it does not support the entire collection of Windows 32 APIs. It also has a 72-hour timeout, which means that after 72 hours, the Windows PE environment will stop and reboot the computer. This is really built in as a installation support mechanism. It allows people, when they do the installs, if for some reason the system did not reboot automatically, it has a 72-hour timeout built into the system to help facilitate the install of additional drivers and features, etc., etc. Driver letter assignments you create in Windows PE environment sessions are not going to be persistent between sessions. That means that if you have multiple media plugged in and you've assigned certain drive letters as you do in the Windows environment, when after that 72-hour reboot, you're going to have to reapply those storage medium settings. You must be able to use, of course, the 32-bit version of Windows PE will only install for 32-bit version of the 8.1 operating system. And likewise, if you have a 64-bit Windows system to install, you're going to have to find the 64-bit version of the Windows PE to install. That means that your install disks are going to be either a 32-bit install disk or a 64-bit install disk. And if you put a 32-bit install disk in a 64-bit system, it's just not going to install the operating system. It's going to tell you that it's not capable of installing that operating system. Alright, so there are some additional limitations. First of all, registry keys are going to be all reset to default values each time the operating system restarts. That means that all of those, if you create personalized settings, those settings typically are saved in the registry. You're going to have to go back and totally redo it. Every time the 72-hour mark hits and restarts, if you've gone in with Windows PE and made changes to the certain registry settings for personalization, customization, they're going to reset themselves. Windows PE, unlike DOS, will not fit on a floppy disk. So in order to install Windows PE, you do have to have a DVD or a CD environment. Might want to add that it is possible to create bootable Windows PE CD-ROMs, DVD-ROMs, and USB flash drives. However, the floppy disk, that's why so many systems today, most systems, matter of fact, I think all systems, none of them ship with a floppy disk. It's something you have to specifically ask. In the 80s and the 90s and even in the early 2000s, you would never think of buying hardware without a floppy disk. In today's environment, no one thinks about buying a 3.5 floppy disk anymore. So part of that is because you can't use it for anything when it comes to the installation of your operating system environment. It does not have a file server or remote desktop capabilities. So if you are into remoting and you want to remote and do remote management of the system, Windows PE is not going to work. Does not support Microsoft Net Framework or Common Language Runtimes, Windows 32, which is what we call WoW 32 or WoW 64 environments. It won't support virtual DOS machines or OS2 or any of that old POSIX subsystem stuff. So if any of that is something that you're looking to run on a Windows framework, just installing the Windows PE environment is not going to do it for you. What's that mean? It means you're going to have to shell out some money for the Windows environment, right? That's what they're telling you. You can't just use the free PE utility as your operating system. So, using Windows PE, it is useful for scenarios that require basic operating system with minimum resource uses. I can use the Windows PE more importantly for things like custom deployments, system troubleshooting, and most importantly, system recovery. So, that's essentially what we use Windows PE for. Deploying the operating system, troubleshooting any problems with the operating system, and in the event of some catastrophic event on the operating system, Windows PE is something we would start in order to run outside of the Windows operating system to facilitate system recovery. Alright, Now, with that said about Windows PE, let's talk a little bit about some actual install scenarios. I'm not going to go into any great depth about some install scenarios. I've got some videos that will do a much better job than I can do in some PowerPoint environment. So watch the videos if you're interested in seeing the actual details of, say, a clean install versus an upgrade install environment. But I do need to talk about what these are and some differences between them. A clean installation, this is the simplest way to deploy Windows 8.1 on a new computer or a computer with a partition that you're willing to reformat. Reformat a partition, that equals losing all the data on the partition in the process. Why do we like to do clean installations? Well, we do clean installations because clean installations help ensure that you're going to have the most stable framework for your operating system. Anytime you do an upgrade from one operating system to another operating system, there's going to be little bits of garbage left over that are going to complicate things like troubleshooting issues or stability issues or application issues. So whenever possible, I recommend a clean install. That means being able to migrate all the data that you want to keep off of the hard drive, whether that's profile specific data, things like your favorites for your web browser, all the way down to all those pictures and music files and things that you may have saved throughout the hard drive. My solution, move it off to external hard drive, move it off to a network share if you're a network administrator and have that ability, and wipe the system and start over. That to me is my advice to you. However, there are instances where we may want to do an upgrade, and we'll talk about that. So that's the overall benefit of a clean install. I'll talk a little bit about third-party device drivers. So when you go into the where do you want to install Windows page, it's going to list the partitions on all of the hard disks, and the setup program can detect with its default drivers. If the hard disk drives in the computer are connected to third-party controller, you got, say, you're running a desktop and you have a RAID controller installed for whatever reason, rather than the one that's going to be integrated in the motherboard, then the list of partitions are going to appear probably empty. That means that you're going to have to supply a driver before the setup program can actually see the disks. So the best thing to do in that instance is check the controller manufacturer's website, look for a driver that's going to be supported by 8.1. If none's available, then use the most recent Windows 8 or Windows 7 driver available for that third-party utility and install that using your DVD-ROM drive or USB drive. Okay? In addition to installing disk drivers, in the same where do you want to install Windows page will enable you to create, manage, and delete partitions on your disks. There are some drive options that the advanced button will take to you that were not available in some previous versions of Windows. For a long time we've been able to delete partitions, format partitions, and create new partitions. But now, provided that you've got some empty space on the just beyond the partition that you're looking to expand, you have the ability to extend a partition. This is particularly useful if you're looking to do a dual boot environment. You want to install Windows 8.1 in that dual boot environment, but for whatever reason the partition you're looking to extend it on, add it onto is too small. I can extend that partition provided I've got some empty space beyond that partition on the drive, and that's one of the a nice feature that is ships with Windows PE environment. So, working with installation partitions, you'll see a screen like this when it says where do you want to install Windows. So you have the option here to load a driver. If you need a third-party driver, you can format, delete, extend, or even create a new partition on most storage mediums. And then you would hit refresh to see your updates. Another way to install Windows is on what we call a virtual hard disk. Virtual hard disk is really a file or group of files stored on any of the computer's physical disks. So when you install Windows 8.1 on a virtual hard disk, it becomes an alternative boot device to the standard disk partition installation. This makes it possible to maintain any number of different independent Windows 8.1 installations on a single computer, and then you can boot into it as you need to. So if I have, say, my son, he really loves to play GTA 4. Maybe I want to have an independent Windows environment for him so that when he's surfing the internet and he's getting all those viruses and stuff on there, and he's really modifying his GTA 4 environment, I can let him boot into his specific Windows environment. It's a virtual environment. Something that the book doesn't really tell you, at least not yet, is that I can take that virtual hard disk environment and I can move it to another Windows 8 system, and it will work just like it did on my Windows 8 system. I think that's really cool myself. So that's one of the really neat things that you can do with virtual hard disk environments. Virtual hard disk environments are something that we work with a lot in NOS 230. And we'll talk about virtual hard disk environments a little further on later this semester. Additionally, after you install Windows 8.1 using a particular language, you can go in and add additional languages as features using the Language Control Panel applet. This allows you to install multiple languages in one operating system. So if you're in a corporate environment and your corporation is owned by the Japanese, for instance, and you have Japanese people coming over and utilizing your operating systems, no longer do you have to provide additional operating systems for them. You can integrate the foreign language support, multiple foreign language support within the same operating system. In order to do that, you go to the application, the Add a Language page, and then you can pick and choose. It's a GUI interface page. You can pick and choose the specific languages that you want to add. Of course, every time you add a language module, you're going to need some additional space on the drive to do that. So just bear in mind that drive specifications or space specifications are completely dependent on the number of features and number of modules you add as part of that operating system environment. Remember, Windows, ever since Windows 7, our operating systems deploy on the DVDs, and they're modulated. So each time you add a feature, you're adding additional modules in and over above what the kernel has. So just a little trivia there. Additional language support. Here's just another example of the language support screen. Well, in this case, I think we've added French to this one. Okay. Parlez-vous français? Ah oui, parlez-vous un petit français, mais mi français est terrible. So, just an example of one way you can add a foreign language as a feature to your existing Windows 8 operating system. All right. There are some additional features that Windows 8.1 includes that are not part of the default installation. Why? Because we don't necessarily, back in earlier versions of Windows, we installed everything, whether you needed it or not. Well, we realized over time that adding things you don't need to an operating system just does nothing but consumes resources on the system. So Microsoft finally, after all these years, heard our pleas, and now Windows comes with a default set of features, and now we can add features that we may need independently, like I said, because it's all modulated now. So we just add these as modules to the operating system. Things like Hyper-V, which gives us those virtual Microsoft virtual machine support. If we need to add legacy components, we need information services hostable web core. For some reason, we're running some sort of little web interface on here, or we have an application that requires that web core interface in order for it to run or connect properly. We can do that. So if you after you do your Windows install, take a look at the additional features page and see what all the features are that can be added things like the media features. And these are the ones that are checked here are features that are added by default. The ones with the little squares are things that are also added by default. I mean, you pretty much have to have the .NET framework. You pretty much are going to get the print and document services installed. There's really no way to change them. All right, so let's talk a little bit. We talked about some of the benefits of a clean install. Let's talk a little bit about upgrading to Windows 8.1. First of all, if you're looking to perform an upgrade, you're going to want to run the Upgrade Assistant and the check hardware compatibility. These are going to help you determine whether or not you have some issues with the hardware, with the applications on the existing system that you need to rectify before you actually transition to Windows 8.1. You're going to want to search for the updated drivers to make sure that you've got drivers for that specific hardware. You're going to want to look for application compatibility issues. You're going to want to make sure you have enough disk space to do the upgrade. You're going to want to, whether you would with any particular upgrade, you're going to want to perform a full backup of the system as a whole. You're going to, of course, want to purchase a valid Windows 8.1 license for your upgrade. If you're going to be upgrading from Windows 8 to Windows 8.1, this is not really what we call an upgrade. This is really more of an update. It does not completely replace the operating system. It just adds additional features. So if you were going to upgrade, say, from Windows 7 to 8.1, that's an in-place upgrade. That's a true upgrade. But upgrade from 8.0 to 8.1 is really an update. It is something you download from Microsoft and it will install, and it just adds additional components. In an enterprise environment, this is an upgrade that can be easily performed by the end user. You really, just about anyone can do this. You don't need a service call to do this. Windows 8, Windows 8 Pro are upgradable through the Windows Store, but if you're running Windows 8 Enterprise, then you can't do this through the Windows Store. You're going to have to go through the Microsoft Volume Licensing to do that. All right, Windows 8.1, Windows 8, Windows RT, and Windows 7 all include a tool which we call the Windows Easy Transfer tool. This enables you to copy valuable data from the original operating system to a destination operating system, and there are a couple ways you can do that. One of which is through moving or migrating that data to a share drive and then migrating it to the operating system once you have done an in-place upgrade. One of those is, say you are moving or transitioning from one physical device to another device. You can actually use a cable and connect the two and allow the Easy Transfer tool to do that. There are a couple different ways that we can do this. So in a Windows 8.1, there are some things you need to remember. As the Windows Easy Transfer tool would do in Windows 7, you could actually transfer from profiles and copy them into the Windows 7 infrastructure. Windows 8.1 version can only transfer files, not the settings or the profiles, and only from Windows 7, RT, and Windows 8. You can't even transfer data from one 8.1 system to another. Why? Because they really want you to start using another tool called the User State Migration tool. It is a command line tool. It is designed primarily for use by administrators. It does allow you to do some more sophisticated migrations of user data. This is a particularly great tool when used in concert with a tool called SCCM. SCCM is a powerful administrative tool which we'll talk a lot about in NOS 230, and specifically if you take my CTS 155 and 255 courses when we do Windows deployment toolkits and deploy operating systems to multiple systems. We use the USMT tool to migrate data. We can actually, with SCCM, say we're going to migrate data from 100 systems at once, from 100 different users. They will deploy to a share. The operating systems will deploy to 100 bare metal systems, and then using SCCM in concert with USMT, they will redeploy all that data to the new operating system. Very powerful, very sophisticated. It requires a lot of back-end setup to make it happen. So it's really advantageous when you're using SCCM and USMT on doing this for a large number of systems. If you're just doing your own system, I recommend the Easy Transfer tool. Works much better, much quicker, much simpler. Okay, so let's continue. Windows to Go. Windows to Go is a great new feature that's available in 8.1. It allows administrators to deploy system images onto removable USB drives. So when you plug a Windows to Go drive into a remote system, that system's going to load the complete operating system environment from the removable medium, all the applications, and any other data incorporated with the image file. And then once it's loaded into the from the to-go drive, the storage subsystem on the host computer will be disabled, so that there are quite literally no remnants of the Windows to Go environment. They're going to be left on that computer when you're done. Why? Well, there are several reasons. Say you have an 8.1 environment that's conducive to specific applications you can be using, say, in a lecture. You can use your to-go drive. You will make sure that you have no compatibility issues. You know that that PowerPoint's going to work fine because it's all contained within that to-go drive. Likewise, say you're concerned about security. You've got some secure things on that drive and you don't want to leave any caches sitting on someone else's system that they might be able to go in and parse out data from. Using a to-go drive, bearing in mind that you need to use something like BitLocker or whatever to secure that drive, so that if someone steals the drive, they can't get the data off of it. But using that tool will allow you to go from system to system without leaving a footprint that someone can go back and try to hash out and get data off of. So the to-go drive does serve some very useful functions, and I do have a video on here that demonstrates how to set up a to-go drive. So just to summarize, 8.1 includes a new pre-installation environment, Windows PE. It's actually not new. It's been around since Windows 7 as version 4.0. 3.0 was something that was released through the Microsoft website for a variety of reasons. And then, of course, we have 5.0, which is available for Windows 8 operating systems or 8.1 operating systems. In a clean installation, you're going to want to boot from the Windows 8 setup disk, create or select a blank partition, and do the install onto that blank partition. You can extend that partition, which is something fairly new in the Windows PE environment, in case you need additional space, provided you've got space adjacent to that partition on the physical drive. Now, it is possible to migrate files and settings from an existing Windows installation to a newly installed Windows 8 installation. We either use the Easy Transfer tool or the User State Migration tool for that purpose. And of course, Windows 8.1 will support in-place upgrades only from Windows 7 and forward Windows 8 to another 8.1 edition. If I want to perform an in-place upgrade, I'm going to have to launch that 8.1 setup program from within the Windows 7 or Windows 8 environment. Okay. To upgrade from one Windows 8.1 edition to another, you can use the Add Features tool in 8.1. It's going to be found in the 8.1 control panel. And Windows to Go is going to be a new feature, like I said, a really cool feature that will allow you to basically carry your operating system and applications with you to use on other systems, provided, of course, the hardware is the memory and all supports it on those systems. Most systems probably will use Windows to Go just fine. So that's it for this lesson. I'll also include lesson 3 as a separate lecture, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.